Hey everybody, this is Jacob, your regular whiskey dude, and today we'll be talking about the worst Scotch whiskey for beginners. Okay, so let me just unravel all of the unnecessary drama. I love the Ardbeg 10, and it's one of my favorite Islay whiskeys. But I don't recommend it as a starter's whiskey. The reasons are very obvious. It's such a unique whiskey, especially given the Islay tasting profile. It's one of the worst whiskeys that you can have in order to get into the world of whiskey. Let's rewind back to 2019. I actually got an Ardbeg 10 as a gift for my birthday, and I was extremely surprised to see how a single malt whiskey can look like. Before that, I was more aware of Scotch blends like Chivas Regal, Johnny Walker, obviously, and probably Ballantine's. And just taking a look at it, it definitely got me drawn in to what the hell is single malt whiskey. And I was super excited to have a dram of it because it definitely looks the part, and I've heard of single malt being, that kind of way more sophisticated whiskey. And then I had a glass, and to be honest, the experience was not so pleasant, If you go from Chivas Regal, Jameson, Ballantine's, all the way up to Ardbeg, you're bracing for a lot of unexpected ventures into the world of Islay Scotch, to say the least. Yeah, but just let me super simplify that. This is a great whiskey, but it's definitely not the whiskey you should purchase if you're starting off with whiskey. If you had some experience with overall like single malt and all the kind of entry-level tasting profiles, and you want to explore the Islay whiskeys in particular, then man, absolutely go for it. I definitely recommend it. But if this is the whiskey that you're wanting to explore, just single malt whiskeys in particular, you might actually get discouraged. And my story actually was a thing of discouragement. The first sip of it, like super smoky, that kind of briny, and the actual taste of a burnt piece of coal, not a freshly burnt coal, but on the day after the big bonfire or like a barbecue, that sort of burnt coal. Very unpleasant. But actually one of my most pleasant experiences with Ardbeg came last March when I actually, for the second time, I got it as a present for my birthdays. It seems to be a pattern of me getting Ardbegs for my birthday. I was actually curious to see, after a couple of years being into the world of whiskey, how I would actually receive the first pour of a Ardbeg. And I was actually so extremely surprised not to have that sort of 2019 experience of having an extensive amount of smoke, briminess, and that kind of burnt cold aftertaste. It was just slightly smoky, and the bourbon cask notes were very present there. And it really got me thinking, how a whiskey fan's taste buds, how they actually evolve throughout time. I still remember that first opening of Ardbeg in 2019 and just feeling like I entered some sort of chemical factory on fire, in that sense. And now it's just like, I don't even consider it super smoky right now. So this shouldn't be surprising. But yeah, enough talk. Let's have a drink. So, okay, let's be less reasonable today. Yeah, I'm still kind of reminiscing of 2019 and that, sense of extreme smokiness and briminess and in an unpleasant fashion. And now, like, all of these kind of extreme tastes and smells are just way more in the background, if that makes sense. And only the just kind of the bourbon cask notes of a single malt whiskey are way more present here. That's something that I'm actually surprised in terms of how a set of taste buds might evolve throughout time. Yeah, so cheers. And you know what? Actually, on the first pour, The burnt coal kind of came back. I probably talked it into coming back, and it's out of spite probably. So definitely Ardbeg is quite a character, but it's way more pleasant in that sense. It's not something that makes me tip my head back and not want to either have a smell or have a taste of it. Yeah, burnt coal, but way more centered between all of these kind of typical bourbon cask finished whiskeys. And it's definitely the type of whiskey that I kind of definitely encourage people not to buy if this is, I don't know, like your fifth whiskey that you bought for tasting and actually exploring the tasting notes. Is there a particular number of whiskeys that you should, I don't know, drink or taste? It's definitely not something set in stone. I just think that it definitely makes sense for you to give it some time, whether it's a year or even two. The moment that you actually taste Ardbeg and all of these kind of characteristic island notes are not that kind of forthcoming, and they're not that much unpleasant in order to restrict you from enjoying the whiskey, then I think it's the right time to get way more into the world of Islay whiskeys. But let's say that you're somewhat on the beginning end of entering the world of whiskey, but you still want to be adventurous and explore some of the either Islay or Islay adjacent whiskeys. I definitely recommend in that scenario Highland Park 10, Talisker 10, and probably like a Jura 10 as well, all of the 10-year-olds. These type of whiskeys, these three in particular, offer you the same slightly toned down element of that kind of maritime, smoky, and slightly peaty tasting notes, but they're still kind of embroiled in that overall sweetness of just like a typical Speyside whiskey, right? This is a very good entry point to these kind of combinations of these kind of odd tasting whiskeys in some sense, right? If you're somewhere along the lines of, spending a couple of years in the world of whiskey, then definitely Ardbeg is definitely on my top 10 list of must-have whiskeys. Absolutely. It costs you around like 40 to 50 bucks, obviously depending on the location. 10-year-old Islay single malt Scotch whiskey, 46% ABV, non-chill filtered. It's such a staple of a whiskey. Slightly briny, slightly peaty, really great to have, especially if you tend to have one particular region or type of whiskey that you kind of really fall into. And then, like for me, it's always all the sherry type whiskeys. So I'm mad about Glendronach, Bunnahabhain, and Glenfarclas. But it's always good to have that kind of counter trend, if I may, in terms of whiskey tasting profiles. So Ardbeg is definitely a staple for me. I would actually want to seek out the Ardbeg Anoa because it has a great combination of that kind of peatiness paired with the sweetness that comes from the Pedro Jimenez casks. Obviously, I started a bit more dramatic than I wanted to, saying that this is this is the worst whiskey ever. But I definitely stand by these words and saying that this is the worst possible whiskey for a beginner, especially if you're new to single malt whiskey and Scotch in general, given all the different regions kind of representing a different tasting profile. Okay, so that's it for today. A bit of a chat about Ardbeg 10. As I mentioned, if you're new to whiskey, then I might actually recommend putting off the purchase of a whole bottle. If you're, salivating on the idea of having Ardbeg or at least trying the whiskey, then I definitely recommend probably purchasing like a sample or just like a smaller bottle depending on your availability in the country you live in. It's a way easier thing to just try out different whiskeys without actually the cost of purchasing a complete bottle. However, if you're more advanced into whiskey, well, the video is probably not for you because you've probably already heard of Ardbeg, so that's nothing adding to it. But just on a side note, from like a personal standpoint, I'm really surprised to kind of acknowledge how my tasting buds have changed throughout 2 or 3 years. to the point that I'm actually capable of enjoying Ardbeg and not even considering it as a very smoky whiskey in some sense. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you had a similar experience with Ardbeg. If you'd like to support the channel, then also you can go to the description below. There is a hefty link below that you can utilize to provide support. Would definitely appreciate that. That's it for today, and cheers. Thanks for watching, and let's cue the outro. Slightly smoky.